You know that feeling when the news cycle just feels relentless?
Yeah.
One minute it's tariffs, the next it's market swings, and then something completely out of left field happens, like, say, a fire at a governor's residence. It can feel like information overload,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. It's just a constant stream, and figuring out what truly matters amidst all the noise. Well, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where this deep dive comes in, hopefully.
Exactly. So today we've got a pretty fascinating mix of sources. We're pulling insights from the April 14th, 2025 edition of Electoral Vote News.
Hmm.
And we're also looking at a couple of articles from PennLive.com digging into that, well, that unexpected event out in Pennsylvania.
Right. Our goal here is pretty straightforward. Just to give you a clear understanding of some significant recent political and legal developments, particularly those involving Donald Trump,
Great.
and also to shed some light on that surprising situation at the Pennsylvania governor's residence.
Okay, let's dive right in then. Trump's tariff policies. Feels like we've been talking about these for ages, and the question our source raises is really fundamental.
Right.
What's the underlying strategy here? We see these constant adjustments now. Smartphones and some electronics are getting a break.
Yeah, and what's intriguing or maybe telling with those specific exemptions is the potential influence at play. The source kind of hints at Apple.
Mm.
And it makes you wonder about the specific economic or, political leverage a company that size might actually wield.
Right. We've seen it before, haven't we?
Well,
Big corporations navigating these kinds of waters.
exactly. And it prompts the question, is this about, like, a coherent trade policy, or are there more targeted pressures being applied?
Or is it just about collecting money? The source mentions that maybe the aim is just getting companies to pay up for exemptions.
That's the cynical view, isn't it? But maybe a realistic one in this context. It certainly paints a picture of a very fluid, almost transactional approach to global trade.
Yeah, transactional. And beyond the actual tariffs, the instability this creates just seems like a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking rules changing, what, day by day, maybe hour by hour?
Mm-hmm.
How can businesses possibly make serious long-term investments with that level of uncertainty?
Well, that's the crux of it, isn't it? Remember the Foxconn factory in Wisconsin?
Oh, yeah, that whole debacle.
That's a prime example, really. It shows how quickly plans can just unravel when the ground shifts under companies because of these unpredictable policy changes. Businesses need some degree of certainty,
Of course.
especially for major projects, hiring. These constant fluctuations make that incredibly difficult. Think about, like, the supply chains we have now, so interconnected.
And the current tariff levels between the U.S. and China are already, well, remarkably high, aren't they? What is it? 145% on most U.S. imports from China?
And 125% on most Chinese goods coming here. Yeah, it's a huge barrier.
That's basically a choke point on trade.
It really is. And if you think about the broader implications, a sustained trade standoff at these levels, it would have severe repercussions for both economies.
Like what?
Well, imagine the impact on Chinese manufacturers if their main export market just shrinks dramatically. Factories shutting down.
In here.
Here in the U.S., like the article notes, consumers would probably see empty shelves at Walmart, Target, significantly higher prices,
Right.
and U.S. companies relying on Chinese parts. They could face shutdowns, too. It's like the supply chain mess during the pandemic, but maybe potentially much larger and longer lasting.
Okay, so the big question that is, who blinks first? Our source touches on the very different negotiating styles of Trump and Xi Jinping. They seem like polar opposites.
They really do. Xi Jinping, he favors that more traditional diplomatic process, detailed negotiations at lower levels, building up to a carefully considered agreement presented at the top.
Structured.
Very. Trump, on the other hand, seems to prefer direct leader-to-leader talks. Maybe believes in the power of personal persuasion, the art of the deal approach.
But the source makes a key point about that, doesn't it? About Zelensky.
Yes, exactly. The way Zelensky was apparently treated in the Oval Office likely left a really strong impression on Xi, made him extremely wary of a similar direct meeting with Trump where he might feel, undermined or disrespected.
That makes total sense. International diplomacy is so much about projecting strength, maintaining face.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what about Trump's idea of isolating China by getting all our allies on board? The source seems pretty skeptical about that working out.
Yeah, very skeptical. And it boils down to trust, really, or the lack of it. The article suggests traditional allies just don't have the same level of confidence in the U.S. as a reliable partner under Trump anymore.
Because of things like threatening to nationalize Canada or seize Greenland, pulling out of TPP.
Exactly. Those kinds of actions, they erode trust. And China, despite its own issues, might be seen by some, maybe paradoxically, as a more dependable partner when it comes to actually sticking to agreements they make.
So the idea of a united front to isolate China, probably not happening.
It looks like a very significant hurdle, let's say.
Okay, so if this trade war really does escalate, what are the concrete negative outcomes we could expect here in the U.S.?
Well, the potential consequences are pretty serious. You're looking at a lack of availability for lots of everyday goods.
Empty shelves again.
Right. Drastically inflated prices on whatever is available, businesses being forced to close because of higher costs or just not getting supplies.
Job losses.
Significant job losses, yeah. And real problems for farmers, agricultural producers dealing with perishable stuff they can't export.
So basically high inflation and higher unemployment. A nasty mix.
That's the likely end result, yeah. A painful combination.
It paints a bleak picture. Now, the timeline aspect is interesting. The source brings up China's long-term perspective. The idea that Xi might just be waiting things out. That quote attributed to Mao about the French Revolution, "It's too early to tell," that really highlights that patient approach, doesn't it?
It does, perfectly. China often operates on a much longer time horizon, you know. They're less constrained by immediate election cycles. Xi doesn't face the same short-term political pressures as a U.S. president.
So he can afford to play the long game?
He can afford to take a more strategic wait-and-see approach, maybe hoping for a shift in U.S. leadership down the line.
So what's the predicted resolution here, according to the source? It sounds like Trump might eventually have to give some ground.
That seems to be the likely scenario presented, yes. The domestic economic pressures, inflation, job losses, angry consumers, they'll probably become too significant for Trump to just ignore.
So he makes a deal?
Probably.
Yeah.
But likely a relatively minor concession to China, maybe something symbolic, like agreeing to buy more soybeans or something.
And then he'll declare victory.
Predictably, yes. He'll try to frame it as a major win, but the Democrats will undoubtedly jump on it as proof he failed to really bring back American manufacturing.
So he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Pretty much. The overall feeling is he's in a tough spot with pretty limited options, actually.
Okay, let's switch gears now.
Yeah.
Something that definitely caught my eye. The odd behavior of the stock market right after Trump's tariff announcements. This sounds, well, it sounds like a financial thriller plot.
It does have that quality, yeah. What's particularly notable is the specific sequence of events. So April 2nd, which the article calls Trump's Liberation Day,
Right.
the Dow closed relatively high. Then came the announcement of these broad and, in some cases, seemingly random tariffs. By April 8th, the market had reacted pretty negatively. Both the Dow and the S&P 500 took significant hits, like 11%, 12% drops.
Ouch.
Yeah. But then, April 9th, Trump suddenly announces a pause on these very tariffs, and boom, the market jumps right back up.
Sharply. Okay, and this is where it gets suspicious,
Yeah.
right? The source points to this unusual surge in trading of something called call options on the S&P 500.
Exactly. Specifically, options that were set to expire that day, April 9th, with a strike price that seemed, well, pretty ambitious at the start of the day.
Explain call options again briefly.
Sure. A call option is basically a bet that the price of something, in this case the S&P 500 index, will go above a certain price, the strike price, by a specific date.
Okay.
Buying a call gives you the right, but not the obligation, to buy at that strike price. These particular options had a strike price of $509. The S&P opened around $496 that day.
So $509 looked like a long shot.
A very long shot. They were likely to expire worthless unless there was a big, unexpected jump in the market that day. Yet there was a really high volume of trading in these specific calls.
And then the market jumped. Exactly as money for those options to pay off.
Precisely. Someone who bought those calls when they were cheap, maybe just a couple bucks per contract, could have made a significant profit when the market surged after the tariff pause announcement.
So the theory being floated here is the initial tariff announcement was maybe a deliberate move to drive the market down,
That's the core of the alleged market manipulation theory, yeah.
creating an opportunity for Trump and maybe his associates to buy up these cheap call options.
Before the anticipated rebound that they knew, or strongly suspected, would follow the announcement of the tariff pause.
Wow. And the source mentioned some of the tariffs seemed really weird, like on uninhabited islands.
Yeah, that detail lends some weight to the idea that maybe the goal wasn't sound policy, but maybe creating maximum market chaos and uncertainty, setting the stage for these potentially very profitable trades on the rebound.
And then there's Trump, reportedly admitting that two of his friends made huge amounts of money, billions.
That really amplifies the suspicion, doesn't it? The fact that Trump apparently openly acknowledged these huge gains, 2.5 billion for one, 900 million for another, raises serious questions.
Like, did he tip them off?
Exactly. Did he give them advance information about the tariff pause? If he did, that could potentially be insider trading, which is definitely illegal.
And did Trump himself buy calls?
That's the other crucial question the article raises. Did he profit personally? Buying call options here would have been a less risky way to bet on the recovery compared to buying stock outright, especially if the market had kept falling.
So the central accusation, boiled down, is that Trump might have intentionally caused financial losses for ordinary people, just for the benefit of his wealthy friends and possibly himself.
That's the essence of it. A very, very serious claim of market manipulation on a massive scale.
Is there hard evidence?
The article points out it's largely circumstantial at this stage, but the timing, the specific options trading, it's certainly raising red flags and prompting calls for investigation.
And some Democratic senators are calling for an SEC investigation.
Yes. Gallego, Kelly, Schiff, Warren, Wyden, and they've requested one.
But the source isn't holding its breath.
Pretty much. It expresses doubt that an investigation led by Trump's own appointee at the SEC, Paul Atkins, would be sufficiently independent or thorough.
So who might actually look into this?
The article suggests New York Attorney General Letitia James could be a more likely candidate. She has jurisdiction over Wall Street crimes, a track record.
Right, she's gone after Trump before.
Exactly. And the source mentions her potential strategy, maybe investigating Trump's billionaire friends to try and get testimony.
Following the money. Classic strategy.
It is. Investigating close associates could yield crucial evidence, put pressure on people to cooperate, even if targeting a former president directly is tricky.
Okay, let's shift again. Another area where Trump seems to be wielding a lot of influence, major law firms. The source describes them as surrendering to his demands. That's strong language.
It is, and what's striking is the nature of Trump's leverage, supposedly. He's basically threatening to ban these huge legal firms, Kirkland and Ellis, Latham and Watkins, others.
Big names.
Huge names, threatening to ban them from public buildings like courthouses, using executive orders. The legality of that is questionable, to say the least.
But the firms folded.
Apparently, they seem to have quickly conceded to his demands, according to the source.
And the cost of this surrender is massive. $940 million in promised free legal work since his inauguration.
With $600 million just from these latest firms alone, it's a staggering amount of pro bono work.
And there's a quid pro quo alleged.
In most cases, yes. The deal, reportedly, was drop investigations into the law firm's DEI practices, their diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, in exchange for the free legal work and a promise not to refuse services to groups deemed politically disenfranchised, which likely means conservative groups.
That raises some serious questions about the integrity of those DEI investigations, doesn't it? Political influence undermining legal practices.
Absolutely. Major concerns there. And the source suggests Trump's main goal might not even be the free legal work itself.
What then?
But rather the public humiliation of these powerful, often politically connected law firms.
Projecting dominance over established institutions. That fits a pattern.
It certainly aligns with his past rhetoric, yeah. Forcing these elite firms to comply could be seen as a big symbolic victory for him.
And it leads to the question the source asks, could this spread? Could we see demands for free planes from Boeing, free software from Microsoft?
Free Big Macs from McDonald's. It seems like a precedent is being set.
It's a valid concern. If this works with law firms, why wouldn't he try it on other powerful corporations? The potential for widespread coercion, distorting market dynamics, it's significant.
Definitely something to watch.
Now, in contrast to these law firms apparently caving, we see Harvard law professors actually suing Trump. So the academic world seemed to be pushing back more directly.
It seems so in this instance. What's significant here is the direct legal challenge. Trump threatened to pull, $9 billion in federal funding from Harvard?
Yeah, for unspecified reasons.
Exactly. Vague reasons. And the Harvard law faculty clearly sees that as lacking a solid legal basis. Their lawsuit, backed by the AAUP,
The Professors Association.
right, the American Association of University Professors. Their argument is that Trump's threats are basically a pretext, a thinly veiled attempt to chill protected speech and undermine academic freedom.
The source definitely frames it as the universities showing more spine than the big law firms.
And it raises an interesting idea about how elite universities could collectively push back against this kind of pressure.
The joint fund idea.
Yeah, pooling a small percentage, like 2% of their massive endowments. Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Princeton, MIT.
Their endowments are huge.
Millions and billions. Even 2% would create a colossal financial reserve. Maybe $7 billion just from the top 20 private schools.
And that money could fund legal challenges.
Exactly. Give them the financial muscle to aggressively sue against what they see as government overreach, maybe even recover damages.
It's a show of unity that the source suggests they currently lack, right? Criticizing them for focusing on their own interests instead of collective action.
Yeah, the comparison to the union movement, the power of solidarity, it's a relevant point. History shows strength comes from collective action. A united front from these top universities would send a powerful message against political interference in education.
Okay, let's turn now to someone who seems to operate outside the normal rules of Trumpism, as the source puts it, Elon Musk.
Ah, yes, Musk.
He seems able to criticize Trump, even oppose his policies, without facing the usual firestorm.
His position is certainly unique, maybe even puzzling. He's publicly contradicted Trump on several key things. Tariffs, for one.
Right, he hates them. Bad for Tesla, bad for SpaceX importing parts from China. Facing those 145% tariffs now.
Exactly. And he bluntly called Peter Navarro a moron. That's pretty unusual for someone interacting at that level. He's even pushing for zero tariffs with the EU, directly contradicting Trump's proposed 10% tariff.
And it's not just tariffs. NASA, too. Trump supposedly wants to cut the budget. Musk's SpaceX is a huge NASA contractor.
Right. Though the source notes Musk's relationship with Trump's NASA pick, Jared Isaacman, who's also a SpaceX investor, is, well, troubling is the word used.
And Musk seems to wield influence inside the administration.
Yeah.
Without even having a job there.
That's what the source suggests. Sitting in on cabinet meetings, trying to influence appointments, like pushing Howard Lutnick for Secretary of State, though that didn't happen.
Lutnick got commerce instead.
Right. And apparently even giving directives to cabinet secretaries sometimes. Plus, backing different candidates in Senate races like Rick Scott when Trump stayed neutral.
Which was a good call by Trump, since Thune won anyway.
True. And Musk supports different figures abroad, too, like the AfD in Germany, Nigel Farage in the UK, differing from Trump's stances there as well.
Is it? Has he become too big to challenge? Trump apparently told him to go back to making cars, but hasn't really pushed him out.
That's the question the source raises. Has Musk become untouchable? It's plausible. His economic power, his social media reach, his cultural influence. Maybe it makes him too difficult to target, even for Trump.
Maybe the fallout from confronting him just isn't worth it.
Could be the calculation, yeah.
Okay, now shifting to something much darker, really. A very serious accusation against Musk detailed in the source. Misusing the Social Security Death Index. This sounds deeply disturbing.
It is a profoundly serious allegation, yes. The SSDI, the Death Index, it's a database of deceased people. Its main purpose is to stop fraudulent benefit payments to the dead.
Okay.
But the alleged new use by Musk, reportedly sending information to the Social Security Administration, falsely claiming that living immigrants are deceased. That's incredibly malicious if true.
And the consequences for those individuals, they sound devastating.
Yes.
Their benefits could be cut off.
Yes. And huge hurdles opening bank accounts because their Social Security number gets flagged as belonging to someone deceased. Problems getting jobs, signing up for Medicaid.
It's like making them bureaucratic ghosts.
Precisely. Being falsely declared dead creates an absolute nightmare. They essentially disappear within crucial systems.
And the source suggests this might be a deliberate tactic.
A tactic to make life so unbearable for immigrants, even legal ones, that they're pressured to self-deport. Just give up and leave.
It's chilling. Really chilling. If true, it's a potential abuse of data with severe human consequences.
Absolutely. A very grave accusation.
Okay, let's move on to another area where Trump seems to be planning a major shakeup. Reviving and maybe expanding the spoils system. Relocating entire government departments to states that bid for them.
Yeah, this represents a potentially massive shift in how the federal government works. The old spoils system was about rewarding loyalists with jobs.
Right, Andrew Jackson, that era.
Exactly. But Trump's proposal to move entire federal agencies based on state bids, that takes it to a whole different level.
And states are already lobbying hard. Florida, Ohio, Texas, fighting over NASA.
That's what the source indicates. Intense political competition already underway. Ohio wants NASA near the Glenn Research Center in Cleveland.
Florida wants it on the Space Coast.
Texas already has Johnson Space Center in Houston. It's become a bidding war.
And it sounds like Trump's personal feelings, political grudges, could play a big role in who wins, not just logistics or strategy.
That's a distinct possibility highlighted by the source. His relationships, or lack thereof, with governors and senators in these states, DeSantis, Cornyn, DeWine, Paxton, it could heavily influence where agencies land. Maybe some surprising choices.
The potential downsides of these relocations seem huge, though. The source mentions the Bureau of Land Management move as a warning.
Indeed. When agencies get uprooted like that, you often see mass resignations. Experienced people who can't or won't move.
So you lose all that institutional knowledge. Expertise just walks out the door.
Exactly. A massive brain drain, which can severely cripple an agency's effectiveness. Plus, shifting agencies out of hubs like the D.C. area could really hurt the economies of states like Maryland and Virginia.
And just scattering government departments all over the country. Seems like it would have to make things less efficient, right? More duplication.
It's the logical outcome. Harder to coordinate, harder to share resources, likely leads to more bureaucracy, higher costs, and just less effective government overall.
Okay, finally, let's turn to that breaking news out of Pennsylvania. The arson at the governor's residence. Just an unexpected and very concerning development.
It really was. Hearing that Governor Josh Shapiro and his family had to be evacuated after an overnight fire, that's quite alarming. Thankfully, initial reports say they're unharmed.
Yeah, thank goodness. But the details coming out from PennLive.com, they paint a disturbing picture. Significant damage, and authorities quickly determined it was arson, intentionally set.
And what's particularly troubling are the details of how the suspect allegedly got onto the property, climbed a fence, evaded security, broke into another building there.
The exhibit hall.
Right. And the reported use of homemade incendiary devices that suggests premeditation.
Definitely. And state troopers were alerted to a breach, probably by cameras. Suggests he was trying to be stealthy.
Mm-hmm. The extent of the damage sounds bad, too, even if the structure itself is okay. Charred furniture, blackened walls, indicates a serious fire.
And the fact that the governor and his family were actually asleep inside at the time.
Just hours after hosting a Passover Seder dinner, yeah. It adds another layer in gravity, another layer of potential risk.
Absolutely. His good Governor Shapiro put out a statement thanking first responders and confirming the family's okay.
It is. But still, an attack like this on the official residence of a state governor, it's deeply concerning. It really underscores the kind of heightened tensions that can, unfortunately, boil over into violence.
And the suspect is in custody, facing attempted murder and aggravated arson charges.
That's what's expected, reflecting the seriousness of the alleged crime.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's striking how these different pieces, trade wars, market swings, pressure on law firms and universities, this violence in Pennsylvania, they all seem to reflect this period of significant instability, maybe even volatility.
Absolutely. We've touched on unpredictable economic policy, really serious questions about ethics in financial markets, the shifting power dynamics between political leaders and major institutions. That alleged misuse of the Social Security Death Index is particularly disturbing if true. And the incident in Pennsylvania is just a stark reminder of how political polarization can escalate in dangerous ways.
It definitely leaves you thinking about the long-term consequences, doesn't it? Across the economy, the legal system, our basic civic norms, what kind of ripple effects will all this have down the line? What does the landscape even look like in a few years? It's certainly a lot to mull over.